The deadbolt slid home like a bullet in a chamber. That was the sound of the trap snapping shut, only I did not know it yet. I stood in the center of the safe house living room, listening to the black sedan peel away from the curb. The front and the bagman were gone, off to the islands to inspect the offshore accounts. 5 days of sun and silence while I watched their daughter. I turned around with a plastic smile, ready to ask the kid what she wanted to do first. Maybe clean the weapons, watch the security feeds, the usual routine. But the kid was not reaching for her tablet. She was not typing out a message for the synthesizer to read. She was just standing there, staring at me with eyes that had seen too much for an 8-year-old. And then the niece I thought was broken, the child who had not made a sound since she was a toddler, opened her mouth. Do not drink the tea she made. She put the heavy stuff in it. Her voice was clear, cold, perfect, like she had been saving it for this exact moment. My blood turned to slush in my veins. Let me back up 6 hours because you need to understand the chain of command here. You need to know how the auditor ended up standing in a fortified mansion discovering that the operation was a lie. My handle is the auditor. I am 32. To the IRS, I am a consultant. To the syndicate, I am the reason the books stay balanced and the feds stay away. I bury the bodies that are made of paper and ink. My handler says I use numbers to control the chaos. He is right. That morning started standard. Black coffee, encrypted laptop. Then the burner phone rang. It was the front. My older sister. 6 years between us, but in the hierarchy, she was untouchable. Her voice was sweet, which was the first red flag. She only used that tone when she was setting up a mark. She needed a favor. She and the bagman had booked a sudden trip to the Caymans. A meeting with the bankers. They needed a sitter for the kid. Of course, I said yes. In this life, you do not say no to family, especially when that family holds the keys to the laundering network. I actually liked the kid. Even though she communicated through a screen, she was sharp, watchful. She had these eyes that soaked up every detail of the business. I drove to the safe house at noon. It was a fortress disguised as a luxury home. The front met me at the door with a hug, which was unusual. She was not the affectionate type. She looked immaculate. Designer armor. The bagman was loading the trunk, looking sweaty and nervous, but he was always twitchy. He was weak. The front walked me through the house. Here is the panic room. Here is the perimeter code. And then she opened the fridge and pulled out a steel thermos. I made this for you, she said. A special blend for stress. You look tired. The auditor needs to be sharp. Something about the way she said it felt off. Too insistent. But I took it. I smiled. I played my role. The car honked. She hugged me again, twice in one day, definitely a tell, and rushed out. I watched them leave. I locked the heavy steel door. I turned around. And there was the kid, standing there looking at me like I was already a corpse. Do not drink the tea. She plotted a hit. I could not breathe. The thermos felt like a live grenade in my hand. My niece, who I believed was mute due to trauma, had just spoken to me with the precision of a soldier, warning me that my own sister, a high-ranking lieutenant in the syndicate, was trying to liquidate me. I set the thermos down on the granite counter. My hands were shaking. I dropped to my knees to look the kid in the eye. You can talk? She nodded. Her gaze was fierce. I always could. The boss's wife made me stop. The room tilted. What do you mean she made you stop? And that is when an 8-year-old girl told me a story that ripped the floor out from under my world. She was not born silent. It was not a medical condition. It was an order. The kid told me she was 3 years old when she learned the cost of doing business. She had walked into the kitchen and caught the front on a secure line, discussing the legacy fund, the war chest the old man left behind. She heard the plan. Eliminate the obstacles. Consolidate the territory. When the front saw the toddler standing there, she didn't offer a cookie. She offered a threat. She grabbed the girl by the arms, hard enough to bruise, and delivered the terms. If you ever speak, the auditor pays the price. Your voice is a trigger. Pull it, and your aunt gets erased. The kid went dark to keep me breathing. 5 years of silence. That is not a disability. That is discipline. That is a soldier protecting her unit. I sat there on the marble floor, the realization hitting me like a lead pipe. The front, my own blood, had weaponized her daughter's love to secure a payday. She played the martyr, accepting awards from the charity circuit for raising a special needs child. while behind closed doors she was running a psychological prison camp. The kid looked at the thermos on the counter. "That drink is the first step," she said. I went into work mode. Emotion is a liability, action is the only currency. I pulled my burner and dialed the medic. She handles the injuries we can't take to a public hospital. She arrived 20 minutes later with a bag full of heavy equipment and 0 questions. She ran a field test on the liquid in the thermos. It wasn't herbal tea. It was a cocktail of industrial sedatives and paralytics. Not a kill shot, but a takedown. It would leave me comatose and vomiting for 3 days. Just enough time for the front to execute the takeover. We needed hard proof. The kid tugged on my sleeve and led us to the home office. She pointed to a reinforced wall safe hidden behind a painting. She knew the code. 0315. The date the alliance was formed. The tumblers clicked and the heavy door swung open. Inside lay the paper trail of a betrayal years in the making. I pulled out the files. First, the bank authorizations. My signature was at the bottom of every page. To a civilian, it looked perfect. But I am the auditor. I know ink. I know pressure. The slant was off by 2 degrees. It was a forgery. Second, the ledgers. The legacy fund was bleeding. Structured withdrawals, always under 10 grand to avoid triggering the federal flags. The front was siphoning the family war chest dollar by dollar. Then I found the kill switch. A dossier labeled with my handle. Inside were fabricated reports detailing my mental decline. Notes claiming I was paranoid, erratic, unfit for duty. She was building a narrative to present to the commission. She wasn't just planning to steal the money. She was planning to burn my reputation to the ground. She was going to have me declared a liability and take sole control of the empire while I lay drooling in a hospital bed. The medic looked at the papers and then at me. "This is a coup," she said. "The front isn't in the Caribbean. She is going to the meet to sign these papers while you are out cold." I looked at the kid. She had saved my life. Now I had to burn her mother's world down. I told the medic to pack up the samples. We were going to war, and I had the ultimate weapon, a witness who had been listening for 5 years. The file labeled with my handle was the smoking gun. Inside, I found fabricated incident reports, forged medical evaluations, and a timeline of my supposed psychological collapse. The front wasn't just stealing the money. She was orchestrating a professional execution of my character. She planned to present this to the commission to prove I was unfit to hold the keys to the treasury. She wanted me declared a liability so she could assume full control of the operations without a single shot being fired. I called the consigliere. He is the only man in the syndicate who can sanction a strike on a made member's family. I laid it out. The forgery, the unauthorized withdrawals from the war chest, and the attempted poisoning. Silence hung on the line for 10 seconds. Then he gave the order. Trap her. Make her believe she has won. If she signs those papers, she breaks the code. Then she is ours. I had to become an actor. I sat on the floor of the safe house and typed a message on my burner. Drank the mix. Feel dizzy. Vision blurring. Going to lie down. I sent it to the front. Her reply came back 2 minutes later. A simple, rest up, handle it. No concern, no panic. Just the cold efficiency of a predator watching its prey stumble. The medic stayed with me while we tracked them. The bagman was sloppy. He was supposed to be ghosting in the Caribbean, but his digital signature pinged off a cell tower in the financial district of the state capital. He posted a photo of a cigar on a private social account, geotagged 3 blocks from the broker's office. They weren't on vacation. They were prepping for the takeover. While we waited, I dug deeper into the safe. I found old correspondence from the matriarch written on her deathbed. The front had tried this before. She had pressured our mother to cut me out, to hand over the empire. The matriarch's written response was in the file, shaky ink on heavy bond paper. I will not feed your greed. The auditor stays. Do not ask again. Even dying, the old woman knew a snake when she saw one. The kid sat next to me watching the surveillance feeds. She pointed at the screen. They go to the glass building tomorrow, she said. Her voice was getting stronger, shedding the rust of 5 years. Mommy said the man in the suit will fix the papers. Day 4. The trap was set. The broker's office was a sterile suite on the 30th floor, overlooking the city we owned. I wasn't there in the flesh. I was watching through a pinhole camera the medic had installed in the conference room. The front walked in like she owned the building. She placed the leather folder on the mahogany table. The bagman trailed behind her, wiping sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. The broker sat at the head of the table. He didn't smile. He slid the transfer documents across the wood. "This gives you sole signatory power over the legacy fund," he said. "It removes the auditor due to incapacitation." The front picked up the pen. "She's sick, poor thing," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It's for the good of the family." She signed. The ink hit the paper. The trap snapped shut. The door to the conference room didn't open for a notary. It opened for the enforcers. 2 men in dark suits, the kind who don't carry badges, just silence. The front looked up, pen hovering. The blood drained from her face faster than the numbers on a crashing stock market. The broker closed the folder. "The commission has reviewed your submission," he said flatly. "They found discrepancies." One of the enforcers placed a tablet on the table. He pressed play. The kid's voice filled the room, amplified and crystal clear. "If I talk, Auntie gets hurt. Mommy said silence is the price." The front stood up, knocking her chair over. "That's a lie. That's a deepfake. The kid is mute." "Selective mutism induced by coercion," the broker corrected. "A violation of the omerta concerning children. You threatened a child to facilitate a theft from the family." The bagman cracked instantly. He fell into the chair, weeping. "I told her not to do it. I told her you'd catch us." The front looked at the camera lens, realizing for the first time that I was the audience. Her eyes were black holes. The enforcers moved in. They didn't read her rights. We don't have Miranda warnings in this life. They just took her by the arms. She didn't scream. She knew the rules. She had gambled the empire on a poisoned cup of tea and a silent child, and she had lost everything. I watched them drag her out of the frame. The bagman followed, head hung low. The feed cut to black. I looked down at the kid. She was holding my hand, her grip like iron. "Is the bad part over?" she asked. "The bad part is done," I told her. "Now we balance the books." 2 weeks later, the final account was settled in the back room of a guarded warehouse in the industrial district. This was not a family court with a sympathetic judge. This was a tribunal. The arbitrator sat behind a heavy oak desk, reviewing the file on the syndicate's internal dispute. The air smelled of stale cigars and ozone. I sat on a metal chair, the kid next to me in a purple dress that looked too bright for the gloom of the room. The bagman was not there. He had signed away his claim to the child in exchange for a one-way ticket to a non-extradition country and his life. He was a coward to the end. The arbitrator looked up from the dossier. He was an old man who had survived 3 turf wars. He looked at the kid. In our world, children are usually just assets or leverage, but this situation was unique. The breach of code regarding her silence had rattled the old guard. "Young one," the arbitrator said, his voice like gravel. "You have started speaking again. That carries weight. Tell us where the loyalty lies. Where do you go?" The kid did not flinch. She stood up, 4 feet tall in a room full of killers. She looked at me, then at the man behind the desk. "I go with the auditor," she said. Her voice was steady, the steel returning to her spine. She is the only one who watched the perimeter. Even when I was silent, she listened to the signal. The front only saw a pawn. The auditor saw a soldier. The arbitrator nodded once. It was done. Custody was transferred. The territory of her upbringing was now under my command. We walked out into the gray light of the city. The kid didn't stop talking the entire ride back to the safe house. She talked about the architecture of the courthouse, the tactical inefficiency of the security guards, and then she shifted to dinosaurs. But she didn't talk about them like a child. She analyzed them like they were heavy machinery. She told me about the ankylosaurus. She said it was the superior operator because it was a tank with a built-in weapon on its tail. It didn't hunt, she explained. It just made sure that anything hunting it ended up broken. I nodded. I understood that logic. We were the ankylosaurus now, heavily armored and ready to break bones if cornered. I converted the spare room in the safe house, reinforced the windows, installed a secure line, but I also let her paint the walls purple. She started seeing a specialist, a doctor on the payroll who knew how to handle trauma without filing police reports. There were bad days when the silence tried to creep back in, when she would check the exits 3 times before sitting down. But there were good days, days when she laughed, a sound that cut through the silence of the safe house like a knife through canvas. The front took a plea deal on the federal charges. The syndicate does not like loose ends in open court. so she was instructed to accept the maximum sentence to keep the family secrets buried. She is currently sitting in a 6x8 cell in a supermax facility, stripped of her designer armor and her influence. She wanted to control everything, and now she controls nothing but the time she spends staring at a concrete wall. I consolidated the accounts. The stolen funds were recovered and laundered back into the legacy fund. I sold the front's house. It was compromised ground. The proceeds went into a blind trust for the kids' education and a secondary escape fund. In this life, cash is the only parachute that opens every time. Sometimes I think about the matriarch. She saw the rot in her eldest daughter's heart long before anyone else. She tried to warn us from her deathbed. She knew that blood does not guarantee loyalty. I sat on the balcony of the safe house last Saturday, watching the perimeter monitors while the kid ate pancakes. She was rambling about a dragon that apologized for breathing fire. It made no sense, and it was perfect. The kid stopped mid-sentence and looked at me. "Thank you for reading the silence," she said. I squeezed her hand. "Silence is not empty," I told her. "It is just information waiting to be decoded." The front thought she was the predator. She forgot that the quiet ones are usually the ones counting the rounds in the chamber. The kid found her voice and I found my purpose. The books are balanced. The debt is paid.